Thank you so much. I want to tell you, I woke up this morning to a sunrise over the ocean, and I love Virginia Beach. I could move here tomorrow. My husband called, he said, tell me about where you are. And I said, I'm in a town that we need to think about coming to. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I just love it here. As an artist, it has always been my hope that my paintings would tell a story. But tonight, I have a story for you. It's one that God is writing on the canvas of my life. It tells of his faithfulness. If you had come to my studio on any day, you would have found that there were many paintings that weren't finished. I worked on many paintings at one time. I always had a plan, but I had many paintings going at many different stages because there were multiple layers of paint on the painting. And with every layer of paint, it added greater depth, richer color, and more interest. It's much like our lives. If you took me at 17, I was a girl that had a lot of confidence. In fact, I actually talked my way into SMU when I was 17 years old. I went, when I was a junior in high school, to the dean of SMU and convinced him to let me come and take senior English in summer school and start SMU in the fall. A little known fact about me is I have a college degree from SMU, but I don't have a high school diploma. I knew I was in the right place, however, when at that very first football game, I met this guy. I was crazy about him. In fact, the very first week we went out on a date after meeting him at the football game, and I literally went back to the dorm after the date, and I went running down the hall, yelling to my college roommate, I've met the guy I'm going to marry. She said, are you crazy? I said, no, I am. I've met the guy. It was in this layer of my life that my confidence and my independence, they grew. But there were so many more layers to come. And 13 years later, I woke up in a very scary layer. I was tied to a hospital bed, and I did not know why I was there. The only thing I knew is that my head hurt so badly and my body ached from head to toe. I didn't know that this man standing next to me was a man that I had met 10 years earlier. I had married. I didn't recognize him as that guy from the football game. So what had happened to me? Well, it was March of 1990, and I went to the hospital with Deb to have our third baby. Callie was born, and we were so excited. We had a 3-year-old little boy, a 6-year-old little boy, and we had our girl, and my husband said, we are done. But we were so happy. But 36 hours after she was born, the nurses found me standing in my bed screaming. And I had this very, very high fever, and I was literally delirious with this fever. They took me in, and the doctors all got called in, and they began to work on me, and it was soon determined that they needed to get my husband to the hospital as quickly as they could because I was going south fast. He got there very quickly, but before he got there, I had slipped into a coma. I literally was very, very sick, and they found out pretty fast after this that I had contracted pneumococcal bacterial spinal meningitis. So I was in bad shape. Over the next week, they did everything they could do. They literally drilled a hole in my skull to relieve the pressure on my brain. They put me on a ventilator to regulate the breathing that I was not doing on my own. And they put an antibiotic bag full of antibiotics, literally one antibiotic after another, all through the week. But nothing was working. I was not responding. And at the end of the week, they went up to the ICU waiting room where my husband was waiting with family and friends. And they pulled him aside, away from everyone else, and they said, you need to start making plans. You need to understand she's not waking up. We've done everything we can do. She's not responding, and we don't have anything that we can do. But God. Across town, God had other plans, and he was acting them out. He literally spoke to a minister, Dr. David Chadwick, and he told David to go to the hospital and to pray over me because this was not to end in death. And David, in obedience to what he believed he heard, went straight to the hospital and he began to pray. He began to pray Lamentations 3:22 and 23, which says, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. For his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And as he prayed these words, he prayed believing that I was going to wake up. He left the ICU. He went downstairs, and as he walked out of the hospital, he said, I knew she was going to wake up. I believed it. Hours after he left, I opened my eyes. It was a miracle. The doctors had no medical explanation. They said, we don't know why she woke up. But David, my husband, the people that had prayed, they knew. They knew that God had touched me in that bed. It was in this layer of my life that I experienced the power of God. It was in this layer of my life that something happened, though. Somewhere in that coma, I lost 13 years of my memory. When I woke up, I believed I was still a college freshman. I believed that I was 17 years old. I did not know that I was a mom. I did not know that I was a wife. And this man that was sitting next to me, he did not look like my Deb. This guy was old. He looked nothing like my Deb. In fact, I literally said, I don't know you. And he said, but you do know me. I'm Deb. But God was so good, because the more he came to my room and kept coming back to the bedside over and over and talking to me, and literally telling me stories about things that we had done together and showing me pictures of me with the children, which, believe me, that blew my mind. He kept showing me these pictures. The more he did that, the more I began to find my Deb in him. God gave me another great gift in that hospital. It came when it was time for me to meet the children. You see, I did not remember them at all. I did not remember having them. I did not remember anything about them. Not what clothes they wore, what cereal I fed them, books we'd read. I remembered nothing. So I can't explain this to you tonight. But when they came into the room and those boys came bounding in the bed, and they jumped on the bed with me, and they grabbed me and they hugged me, and they put baby Callie in my arms. All I can tell you is I knew they were mine. I knew it. And knowing that that was my death, and knowing that those were my children, that was the catalyst for me wanting to go home. The doctors began to talk about me going to rehab. They said I needed to go to rehab to get well before I went home. They believed that my memories were going to come back as soon as the swelling on my brain went down, but they felt like I needed to go to rehab to get ready for that to happen. I wanted nothing to do with rehab. So the Marcy that talked her way into SMU at 17, you got it, talked her way out of the hospital at 30. I convinced everyone that my memories were coming back. I literally put on the acting gig of a lifetime, and they believed me. And they let me go home. And I went home, and I was thrust into this life as a wife and a mom with 3 small children, and I will tell you, it was hard. I did not know what I was doing. I was terrified on most days. I would go to my kitchen table in the morning before everyone got up, and I would beg God to give me my memories back. I would beg him. I would tell him, I can't do this without memories. And you fixed me in the hospital. You fixed my body. Please fix my mind so that I can do this. But it was as if I wasn't being heard, and my prayers weren't going past the ceiling that I was praying in the room. Nothing was happening. And it was terrifying because I had lost part of myself. I'd lost 13 years of myself in that hospital, and I'd left it there. And I was terrified. Going out in public was so scary because everyone knew me, but I didn't know them, and they didn't know that I didn't know them. I remember going to the grocery store when I could finally run errands with the kids, when they finally let me take the kids in the car, which was several months later. So I had a memorized route to go to the Harris Teeter in Charlotte, and I literally got to the grocery store. I was so proud of myself. I got all the groceries on the list. I got the kids back in the car. I got myself back in the car, got the groceries in the car. We were ready to go home, and I missed the memorized turn on the memorized route home, and we were lost on the roads of Charlotte for a long time. It took my 6-year-old to get us home. It was in this layer of my life that I experienced loss and fear. It was in this layer of my life that I began to hide another dark secret. It started off so innocently at first. I will tell you, it was so innocent. It was a simple glass of wine, but it soon became a problem. I drank to forget what I couldn't remember. And before long, I was fully addicted to alcohol. Yet I was highly functional. I was a wife to Deb. I was a mom to the kids. I even started a corporate consulting business, and I was actually successful. I mean, it blew my mind. How could someone with no memory be successful doing something? But I could. I did it. But I drank every night after the kids went to bed. I had to drink. And I knew I needed to stop, but I couldn't. I thought, well, strong-willed Marcy can fix herself. I can do this. So I tried, but it didn't work. Eventually, I went to a 12-step program. But I walked into the room, and I'll just be honest with y'all, I walked in, and I literally stood on the back of the room, and I'm like, I am so not like these people. And I sat in the back of the room, and I watched everybody, and I took about all I could take in. And then I slipped out early. And on the way home, I stopped and bought a very expensive bottle of wine. Because I told myself alcoholics don't drink expensive bottles of wine. But I drank the entire bottle that night to celebrate not being an alcoholic. The next day was December the 9th, 1997, and it was the day that completely changed my world. It was starting like any other day, and it was ending the same way like any other day ended in our household. We were watching TV as a family, and I drew the short straw to take our dog out. We had adopted this really cool greyhound, and when I said I need to take the dog out, nobody else raised their hand. So who draws the short straw but Mom? So I start taking him out. I come back up the driveway with him, and he did something he had never done before. He saw something at the end of the driveway. I don't know if it was a bunny or a cat, but all 80 pounds of him went in that direction and pulled me down. I went straight to the concrete in the driveway. And as I was getting up, I had a perfect view through our French doors where my family was waiting for Wizard and me to come back in and join me. And at that moment, I will tell you that God spoke to my heart. I didn't hear him audibly. I don't want you to think that, but I heard him in my heart, and I knew the voice, and I knew it was God. And I will never forget the words that I heard. That is what I saved you for, the future, not the past. And as much as that father loves his children, I love you more. And just as that father's holding his daughter in his arms, I'm holding you. And I will never let you fall, but you have got to trust me. At that moment, I knew I wanted God's will for my life without my memories more than I wanted my will with my memories. The next day, I went back to that 12-step program, and this time I stayed. I knew that night in the driveway that I was going to surrender my life fully to the Lord. Oh, I had been in church since I was a little girl. I knew all about Jesus. I knew all of that. But that night, I wanted a relationship with him. I wanted something different. And that's what happened. And it was in this layer of my life that God painted over my loss and fear with his love and grace. Not long after this, I was in the attic looking for something for one of the kids for a school project, and I ran across a box that had a Bible on the top of the box. It was the Bible that my mom and dad had given me when I went off to SMU. In the front of the Bible, Mom had written Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, which says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. The first 4 words jumped off the page at me. I literally knew God was speaking to me again. Trust in the Lord. And I thought to myself, I've spent my entire life trusting in Marcy. I don't know if I know how to trust in God. I want to. I remember sitting in that hot attic telling God, I want to trust you, but I don't know how. Show me what it looks like to trust you. And over the next several years, he began to show me what it looked like to trust him through the no matter what's that came. And no matter what's come, because this is life we're living. And the more I trusted him, the more I learned that he was trustworthy. The kids all graduated from high school, and the house got really quiet. And I woke up one morning, and I had a burning desire to paint. I went downstairs, I told Deb, I want to take painting lessons. He said, why would you take painting lessons? You majored in art at college. And I said, don't you remember that I don't remember? So I took painting lessons. And I began to take under this renowned instructor in Charlotte. And after about a year, he came to me and he said, I want you to be my resident artist. I want you to work alongside me for the next 6 months. And I said, I'm all in. So what that meant was for 5 days a week, I would work with him 7 hours a day in his studio. And it was an amazing opportunity. I literally painted with him and helped him teach classes. And I learned so much. He literally gave me my love of color. I was 1 week shy of graduating from the program. And I took a hard fall at our house and fell down the flight of stairs in our house. I was getting ready to go to his studio, and I fell down the flight of stairs. When I landed at the bottom, I knew I had done something really bad to my leg. I just didn't know how bad. I literally knew I'm not going to the studio today, and something tells me I'm not going to be painting for a while. After I got back from surgery, they told me I had literally severed a tendon in my leg and crushed my kneecap. And I was going to be confined to bed after surgery for a long time. I was devastated. I remember thinking, God, what are you trying to say to me? Why is this being taken away from me? This is something I love and I'm good at. Why? But I realized, and the thing that I hated worse than anything is that I was so independent, and I, for the first time in my life, was completely dependent on everyone for everything. The first night home from the hospital, I was in so much pain. I was waking up every 20 minutes. And I remember at about 3 a.m., I woke up and I told God, I need you to meet me in this room like you met me in the driveway years ago. I need to hear from you. I can't do this. I'm exhausted. I can't do this pain thing all night long. I'm tired. Meet me. I'll take an angel in the corner of the room. I'll take anything. But instead, I had a verse that came to me. It was a verse that my dad had given me growing up. It was a verse that Deb and I gave to our kids. It was, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. I knew this verse, but it came into my mind like just wham. So I began to lay in bed and say this verse over and over and over again. And before I knew it, there was sunlight coming in the window. I'd slept. It was early, and I didn't want to wake Deb up because we had had a long night. So I took my devotion book off my bedside table. I want to read you part of what it said. It was March 16th. It is good that you recognize your weakness. That keeps you looking to me, your strength. Abundant life is not necessarily health and wealth. It's living in continual dependence on me. When you look to me and whisper my name, you break free and receive my help. And the verse for that day was Philippians 4:13. I knew at that moment that God had spoken to me at 3 a.m. I just didn't know it until the dawn. It was in this layer of my life that my independence began to melt into a beautiful dependence on him. And over the next 8 months of hard physical therapy, I began to learn that he was the God that would provide for me. After I got back up on my feet, I began to paint a lot. I was in my studio about, I would say, 6 days a week, around 8 hours a day. I could not get enough. I was finding my voice in the world of abstract art. And the more I painted, the more I loved it. And my paintings got big, and they got big, and they got bigger. I just loved it. I literally, to my surprise, found that my paintings were beginning to sell, and it shocked me because all I did it because I loved to paint. I got picked up by a gallery in Atlanta, and then I got picked up by a gallery in Charlotte. And at this point, painting for me went from being a hobby to being a profession. And I really became a professional artist at this point in time. In 2013, something changed about my work. It started with a phone call from my mom to let me know that my dad, who I was very close to, that hospice had been called in. He was really sick. And I had to get home. I had to get to Texas. I literally couldn't get a flight out that day, so I went to the studio to get everything cleaned up to be gone. And when I got to the studio, there was a 40-inch by 40-inch canvas on the easel. And all of a sudden, I had this idea, I'm going to paint something for my dad in his honor. So I mixed up some paint, I stood behind the easel, and I could think of all these things I wanted to paint, but then when it came time to do it, nothing came. I literally was empty. I was so filled with grief, I couldn't paint for the first time ever. So instead of painting a painting, I took my dad's favorite verse and I put this on the canvas. I wrote it in this translation. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And I wrote it in this because we all have a this. And for me, losing my dad was my this. I went to Texas the next day, and I saw my dad for a little bit of time, and then I came back to Charlotte after the funeral. I walked in my studio, and this painting was waiting for me when I walked in, this canvas was. And as I saw it, I knew the minute I saw it that this would be the way that every one of my paintings would start from this day forward. That I would put scripture across the blank canvas. It would be the underpainting for every painting that I painted from this day forward. A different scripture would line the canvas, and then I would paint the painting, and literally that would be the foundation for the work, and it would be the inspiration as I painted. And so for the last 12 years, every painting that's left my studio has had scripture that has been the foundation for the piece itself. In 2018, something, I guess you'd say, a new layer was added to my life. It started with pain in my hands. It came on so suddenly. I went to the doctor. I said, I do not know what is going on, but I cannot hold the paintbrushes. My hands are killing me. What is going on? They did blood work, x-rays, MRIs, and they told me that I had rheumatoid arthritis. It was like a kick in the gut. But I didn't really know how bad it was going to be until I really started dropping the paintbrushes in the studio. Until my very dearest friend brought in tennis balls. And so she put the tennis balls on all the ends of my paintbrushes, and that's how I've held on to my paintbrushes for all these years to paint. So it would be what I would literally hold on to so I could hold on to the paintbrush itself. I will tell you that this layer does not make sense. Over the last 5 years, I've had 7 surgeries on my joints, many of them on my hands. I've got rods in all my fingers, and it doesn't make sense. But I've been given the grace to walk through this because in this layer, I have learned that he is steadfast and he is trustworthy, and I can rest in that. In January of this year, I entered a new layer, one that I wasn't expecting. But I heard the voice that I heard in the driveway years ago in my heart telling me it was time to lay my paintbrushes down. With my RA, it is time. I can't hold the paintbrushes anymore, and I need to stop. I don't really know what this layer holds, but I have peace. And I remembered when I heard that voice in my heart, I remembered standing in my first studio 18 years ago, telling God I would hold my art lightly. Which I think is very interesting because now I'm holding it lightly. And in this layer, I have great peace because I know and I have seen through many layers that God is good. And I trust him. I trust him. John 5:17 tells us that God is always at work. Romans 8:28 tells us that he's working all things together for our good. It doesn't say that all things are good. It says he's working all things together for our good. I believe this. I've seen too much in my life to not believe it. When I was on my book tour, people would come to me and say, well, you just wish you'd gotten your memories back. And I thought to myself, you know what? I was given so much more. During the time I was in the studio, God taught me so much. Much was learned behind the canvas that I am thankful for. And one of the things that I learned was as I was layering paint on my canvas, and there were many layers of paint on my paintings. And every layer, some layers were great, and some layers weren't that great and needed to be covered up with another layer. They weren't great. And I would add another layer. But every layer mattered because it made the final painting what I wanted it to be. It made the colors all glow as I came to the end of the painting. And I realized God is the master artist. We are his canvas. And every layer in our lives matters. He uses everything. He doesn't waste anything that happens to us. We all have a story. You have a story with many layers, and some layers are great, and some layers don't make sense. In fact, in a room this size, I'm sure there are women who are saying, I'm in a layer where I'm asking, how much longer and why is this happening? Well, I can tell you, if you're in that layer, you can trust him, because just like I had a plan when I was behind the canvas painting, he has a plan, and it is for our good. I believe that. Let me leave you with one last story. I was in Dallas with one of my 5 grandchildren. It was Wyatt. He was 5 at the time, and he and I were drawing. And I was working on my picture, and he was working on his, and literally, I finished mine up, and he went, well, that's pretty good, Cece. And I thought to myself, well, I am a professional artist, Wyatt. And then he takes my painting, and he literally takes a big marker, and he makes this big abstract mark all over it, making a design on top of my painting. And I'm thinking, what is he doing? And then he holds it up, and he says, look it, Cece, I made it better. And literally, I realized he had made a completely different design with one layer. He had changed the picture with one layer. And to this grandmother, an abstract artist, it was better. So I left Wyatt that day, and I headed back to Charlotte. And the next day, I was in my studio. And as I walked in, there was a 5-foot by 4-foot painting on the easel that I was working on for a big show that was coming up. And it was pretty much done, I'll have to be honest. But I was so intrigued and so inspired by Wyatt that I just couldn't help wondering what would happen if. So I got the bee in my bonnet that I was going to do what Wyatt did that paint. So I mixed up a big batch of turquoise paint, and I did what Wyatt did to my painting. And literally, it was the first painting that sold at that show. And when I told Wyatt that, he said, well, where's my commission? And we still are working on that. I want to encourage you, as Wyatt is so famous for saying, look it. Watch expectantly for what God is doing in your life. And if you're waiting for him to make a mark, to add a layer, know that you can trust him because of what Jesus did on the cross. He loves you that much. Know that you can trust him because of what happened in the tomb. We serve a God that is alive. You can trust him because of what Philippians 1:6 says, that he's going to finish what he started in you and in me. He's going to finish the work he started. Because the truth is, he is the master artist. We are his canvas. And he's going to add greater depth, richer color, and more interest to our lives for our good and for his glory. Because every layer matters. Every layer matters, my friends. Thank you so much.